Oftentimes in countries that have a beautiful countryside or an incredible scenic and historically important area of wildlife, efforts will be made by the government to preserve this beautiful slice of nature in the hopes of allowing the public at large to enjoy its unaging beauty for centuries to come by establishing federally protected locations that prevent further developments of any kind that could damage the protected area known as a national park or wildlife preserve. Unfortunately, these unbelievably perfect natural sceneries also seem to hold a dark secret that governments work around the clock to attempt to cover up in their efforts to prevent panic from further spreading into the public at large. Today, we will be going over and discussing these strange dark secrets and a possible theory as to what could truly be going on under the surface. There seems to be an unreasonable amount of disappearances that occur in national parks from around the world, an almost disproportionate amount given any other area it is compared to regarding visiting populations of any kind. Of course, skeptics might argue that it would make sense for there to be so many disappearances given the fact that national parks are massive and, to an untrained individual, could potentially be a death sentence if they happen to become lost in its unending size. This does not appear to be the case, however, as we are not merely discussing fatalities or discovered bodies. In fact, we are talking about quite the opposite. Many people walk into a national park and are never seen and heard from again. This strangeness is compounded when regarding information surrounding the missing hikers and campers. There are many experienced hikers and campers who disappear completely. Some such hikers even laying out plans of travel, backup phones in case of emergency, telling family members and friends where their trail will be covering, and so on. But when search parties go out to find them, not a single clue left behind as to what could have possibly happened to them seems to surface. Take, for example, one such case of a young 27-year-old man by the name of Vadim Mukim. Vadim had went out into the area of the Sunset Falls campgrounds with multiple friends and experienced outdoorsmen in the hope of having a relaxing time out in the national park located near where he lived. Vadim was no stranger to the outdoors, and it was often common to find him amongst other experienced hikers, campers, and outdoorsman enthusiasts. Oddly enough, the group of friends spent the day riding mountain bikes and ATVs, having fun before heading back to their cabin. When they were at the cabin at roughly 6 o'clock p.m, the group of friends went out again to go ride for a little while more in the dark. Vadim decided to stay behind to relax a bit, and so told his friends to go on without him. When the friends later returned, only a few hours had passed, but it seemed obvious that something was wrong. Vadim could not be found anywhere. Immediately, the group of friends contacted authorities, but it was apparent that he had mysteriously vanished without a trace of a clue left behind to find out where he went. No tracks, no written note, nothing taken from his equipment. Vadim just disappeared. Over the next few days, search crews of over 100 different volunteers worked tirelessly to search for Vadim and combed the area in rigorous search, but still found no trace of the man even within the search radius of 3 miles. Vadim's case is not the only one of its kind. Countless reports of people going missing seem to happen all the time in national parks. Oddly enough, these reports do not contribute to the death count provided by government statistics, and so are then essentially covered up for some unknown reason. Could it be that there is something to hide? For us to find that out, we need to ask the right questions. If these people who have gone missing were in excellent physical and mental condition, while also possessing incredible hiking skills, and were essentially regarded as individuals of whom knew exactly what they were doing when they went missing, and there was still no trace of them to be found, then we need to consider the idea that perhaps there is something other than the decisions of these hikers at fault for their disappearances. So we should first ask ourselves, is there something that is being hidden that exists in these national parks? One of the biggest clues that we can first gather is the creation of national parks and the reason for it. Why and how are national parks formed? It appears to be very simple. National parks are formed by an act of the government of said country, declaring the land to now be protected and immediately seized by said government. This has caused a variety of issues in the past. One most notable is the reference to the town of Boston, Ohio, that formed the national park under an executive order by the president on top of an already existing town that led to many residents of the town to be forced out of their homes at gunpoint. Could it be that perhaps national parks are formed to hide something that has been found? To preserve wildlife or creatures that otherwise need to remain hidden? Why else would the creation of such zones be so violent and protected by the federal government? An interesting statistic of this idea comes from the commonly reported sightings of strange creatures in national parks from around the world. In the Aokigahara forest, many have reported supernatural sightings of the spirits of departed individuals and strange orbs of light following them. All throughout North and South America, national parks are a hotspot for alien activity, sightings of creatures known as Sasquatches. In other places around the world, strange monsters, demons, and other appearances are reported in national parks, and it seems to be a trend that only continues to grow as more and more tourists visit these areas. Could it be that these areas are being preserved to cover up these strange sightings and occurrences? Further evidence can be found when analysing a surprising number of cases found at the Green Mountain National Forest near Glastonbury Mountain and Vermont's Long Trail. In fact, many locals regard the area with a sense of supernatural and paranormal themes, as many of the disappearances appeared to happen in a relatively small area referred to as the Bennington Triangle. The area was provided that name by the locals after an unreasonable amount of disappearances began to happen during 1945 to 1950 of experienced hikers, travellers, campers and outdoorsmen. Some of these disappearances also seemed to occur while the person was still within 50 yards of their group, but still happened to vanish without a trace. Connections made in a previous video that linked the strange occurrences of Bigfoot sightings and unidentified flying objects has caused us at Unexplained Mysteries to make further connections between ancient myths and religious beliefs from around the world. What if the reason for why governments are forming national parks and preventing these areas from being further developed is due to the fact that maybe these locations around the world are hotspots of paranormal, supernatural, and extraterrestrial activity? What if these areas are gateways to other worlds or realms? An interesting parallel can be made about the old myths of Merlin the Wizard, who claimed to have entered deep forests to locate a long-forgotten race of ape-like creatures that had the ability to do magic and travel between different worlds. What if then these Sasquatch creatures are potentially ape-like creatures that Merlin claims to have encountered, and the cause for so many people disappearing without a trace is because perhaps they had stumbled into a gateway to another world or were taken there by some strange creature? Further evidence of this assumption can be found by analysing the peculiar case of 8-year-old Catherine Van Alst, who disappeared from Devil's Den State Park near the Arkansas Ozark National Forest for over 6 days. It was a wonder to the search and rescue team to have found the young girl alive after nearly a week of being lost in the woods, given that most people will collapse of exhaustion after less than a couple of days. Oddly enough, the young girl appeared to not have been aware of the time having passed, and when she was located, she calmly walked out of a nearby cave and said, "Here I am," with no cause of concern or worry. This puzzled the search and rescue team, as it almost appeared as if the little girl had been untouched by time and was not even aware of having been missing in the first place. Many experts speculated a possible abduction attempt, but the facts of the story do not seem to match up with the recovery or the information provided by the girl, who claimed she was just playing with her brothers and then suddenly was being called for by name as she exited the cave. Einstein predicted that the nature of space and time begins to warp and change around strange openings known as wormholes. He would later go on to predict that movement between large expanses of space and time could be possible via wormholes, and that wormholes could potentially pop up anywhere. Could it be that perhaps these strange creatures have the ability to conjure up these tears in the fabric of space and time, or that perhaps these national parks naturally hold these supernatural occurrences inside them, purposefully hidden by the government from the public? Although we may not have all of the answers, the researchers at Unexplained Mysteries are working around the clock to make further connections and provide evidence to these theories, and more to come. But what do you think of these string of disappearances and the odd nature of the national parks formed by governments from around the world. Be sure to let us know by leaving your questions and answers in the comments section below, and help us to grow this community and work to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos. The prediction made by Mark Twain. Mark Twain was an enigmatic figure in history who only seemed to be wrapped in strange coincidences, as he happened to be friends with nearly all of the great figures of the past. He would often spend his leisure at the lab of Nikola Tesla himself, and would often find himself at parties with people such as John Jacob Astor IV and J.P. Morgan, while talking about his strange obsessions with his constipation, regardless of the objections from his listeners. But possibly one of the strangest facts regarding the pivotal American author was his prediction of his own death that ended up coming true. You see, Mark Twain was born in 1835 on the day that the celestial body known as Halley's Comet was passing by the Earth. This comet only passes in orbit once every 76 years. As the comet was slowly approaching once more, Mark Twain told all of his friends that when the comet returns, he will pass. Strangely enough, Mark Twain died during the comet's appearance in 1910, several years after he made the prediction. Cause of death? A mysterious heart attack. Miss Unsinkable. A young woman known as Violet Jessup loved her job working as both a stewardess and a nurse working on the ship the HMS Olympic. Unfortunately for her, the ship she was working on would later collide with another ship known as the HMS Hawk, leading to its sinking and the death of many of her friends and co-workers. This did not deter her, however, as she later went back to continue her work as a nurse and stewardess on the HMHS Britannic. Unfortunately for Miss Jessup, during the Britannic's main voyage, the ship struck a mine which would go on to lead to a tragic scene of the ship sinking in the ocean and many of its passengers perishing. But again, Violet Jessup survived and was dubbed Miss Unsinkable. Scarred by these two events, Miss Jessup swore that she would no longer work on a boat that could sink, and so quickly took a position working as a stewardess and nurse on the boat regarded around the world as completely unsinkable, the Titanic. Many are aware of what happened on this ship and the terrible events that would later occur. Still, despite this, Violet Jessup survived the sinking of the Titanic and gave up her job working on boats to settle for something a little less dramatic. Jewelry and weapons made from iron. Throughout Egyptian mythologies and legends, there are numerous records that detail the Egyptian gods providing many gifts to humanity and to the then reigning pharaohs of Egypt. Many of these gifts range from animals, such as the domesticated cat, to weapons and daggers made out of special materials. Oddly enough, evidence of this was found when archaeologists began to notice that iron weapons could be found in tombs that predated the Iron Age by over 200 years, as well as iron jewellery that was dated around 3200 BC that were discovered back in 1911 from two different tombs in an ancient Egyptian cemetery. This became a mystery as the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun was also found to be surrounded by a large collection of iron weapons, including a specially crafted iron dagger dating to be generations before the beginning of the Iron Age. The ancient aliens community speculated that perhaps these iron weapons were the gifts referenced in ancient Egyptian myths that were crafted by the gods, and that perhaps they were forged from materials found in space. Oddly enough, when researchers began testing the weapons as well as old Egyptian jewellery for any additional information, they found strange tracings of non-terrestrial isotopes in the materials. In an effort to better understand the creation of these strange weapons, archaeologists and Egyptologists sent in samples of the weapons and jewellery to undergo further testing to find out any additional information surrounding the weapons. These test results found that not only were these daggers filled with a variety of different minerals impossible to craft, but that the composition of the materials matched those found in meteorites and not found on the planet Earth. This has left many experts scratching their heads as to how this could have occurred given the large amounts of meteorites they would have needed to harvest the material from that would not have burned up in the atmosphere and the quality of the weapons and jewelry that was produced. The Plague of Cyprian. As the great Egyptian city of Luxor was being excavated with care and detail, the team came upon a strange discovery that did not seem to match the previously established timeline of the city and its population. According to the pottery discovered at the site, the ancient city of Thebes was well aware of many new Romans of whom were coming into the city around the time of 250 AD, of whom brought with them a terrible affliction. This affliction was then given the name of the Plague of Cyprian, as it appeared that the Roman Empire was greatly affected by this plague that would later go on to spread all throughout Egypt and possibly used as a strategic attack. Much of the pottery and the descriptions of the event even recalled the event similar to that of an attack, speaking that the disease invaded every home and killed a large portion of the population. Although experts believe the event to have been a reference to the smallpox illness, this discovery seemed to directly contradict the expected population at the time and the believed growth of the city and the international trading hub it represented. Although it appears that Egyptologists today have found a way to account for this event, it seems as though the event was not referenced in any other city in Egypt, and that for some inexplicable reason, this was the only surviving account of the ravages of the disease and its origin, as well as giving a detailed account of the disease, its symptoms, and the spread through the Roman Empire.